Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all those who are attending and listening. As Sajid Bhai has mentioned, it's an important topic. Obviously, it comes around this time of the year, and it can be a difficult topic or difficult sort of situation that may fall upon people because, we share office spaces, we share workspaces, we share educational spaces with folk who are non-Muslim, obviously, but then they can have an inclination towards Christianity. Maybe they come from a Christian background, or maybe they have a Christian upbringing, or even, somewhat of a secular upbringing. But there's always, like the way we like to celebrate Eid, even if we have somewhat of a secular outlook in our Islamic life. Similarly, we find folk who have a Christian background, who may pretty much live a secular life, also have an inclination towards celebrating around this time of the year. And so it can prove difficult, whether it be, and I'm sure some of these questions have already been sent in, Sajid Bhai, and I'm sure others will come in as well, which obviously once I've had my little spiel for 5-10 minutes or so, I'm sure we can go straight onto those. And these are the sort of queries we get regularly. So rather than responding to each query individually, it makes more sense to tackle them in a form of a video. And then obviously this can be shared, inshallah ta'ala, and others can benefit. So let me start just by giving a brief of where we stand with Christmas generally. And then we'll also touch upon the sort of celebration of the new year and its sort of ramifications. So Christmas, obviously, everybody will still agree, even though we've seen some changes in this last century, that Christmas is a religious celebration. There is no doubt. If you speak to anybody of a Christian inclination, what I mean by that is that they are religious in some way, attending church, take kind of ritual religious acts seriously, maybe conduct some acts of worship. They will say to you that obviously, clearly, Christmas is a celebration which brings them closer to God. It's a way to remember Jesus, especially those who consider Jesus to be God. And as a result, it's a way of celebrating his life, obviously his birth. It's a mercy to mankind that Jesus was born. He is, again, I'm speaking from the Christian mindset. He is the savior, the Lord savior to save mankind from destruction. And if we take that further, it is an understanding in which God sacrificed his only son in order to remove the sins of mankind, and as a result, allow them to enter into heaven. And therefore, just as a way of expressing gratitude, this time of the year, we should, attend Mass. Again, like I said, I'm speaking from a Christian perspective. We should attend Mass, and then we should celebrate by exchanging gifts and, getting the family together and expressing thankfulness, expressing gratitude. If we in the States, it's more kind of thanksgiving to say, shukr to Allah, basically, is the way we would understand it. And this is the way it's expressed. So there's no doubt in that. If anybody suggests that it's not a religious festival, they're not being honest. And if they do, as I said, speak to Christians, they will tell you that this is our religious festival. And it continues to be a religious festival to this day. That's another important point to bear in mind, that some will argue that, well, yeah, okay, maybe it was a Christian festival, but it isn't now, even though, let's just look at it from our perspective. The United Kingdom is a Christian country, and we have the head of church as our queen. And therefore, if during censuses, which are carried out, 70% will say that, they are Christian. In reality, are we really a Christian country? Are we really, are people who are claiming to be Christian really Christian? But that's a theological argument, discussion, which is, beyond today's remit, especially when we understand Christianity can be expressed. Obviously, if we move away from Catholicism and those who say Jehovah's Witnesses and people who would be considered to be more, I choose my words carefully, but those who express a more faithful and traditional understanding of Christianity, then, they will all say that, yes, absolutely, we are living in a Christian country, and absolutely, this is a Christian festival. So that's a point that I hope I have established, beyond doubt. And you don't need to take my word for it. You can, search on reliable sources whether of a Christian nature or even an academic nature, and you will see there's sufficient evidence to support that. The second point is as to whether that continues to be the case now in 2020. Is this still a Christian act? And again, by referring to my earlier point that I just raised seconds ago, there is clear celebration of a religious act that I've already explained, and that considers or continues to be taking place to this day. So it is still a religious act. So point number 3, you'll also find that people of a more secular understanding of the world still kind of celebrate Christmas, okay, at this time of the year, even though they may, openly say that they're not Christians. They may have got married in a church and they may not have baptized their children, but they will still feel that they are not Christian. They carry out their lives according to what they deem to see fit. They will live their lives according to their understanding of things, and it won't be that they will actually feel that Christianity plays a part in their day-to-day lives, but they will still celebrate Christmas. So it could be argued now that Christmas is more of a secular practice rather than a religious practice. That's also then supported by the financial push and the consumeristic push that we find within a period of Christmas, the buying of Christmas cards, the buying of gifts, the Christmas tree, certain procedures and practices that we need to go through, which obviously brings a lot of investment into the economy. People are spending a lot of money, and even Christians will kind of, turn their face away from that type of level of consumerism to say this is not really Christianity. Christianity is helping a poor person who's sleeping rough on the street, making sure that people are fed. It's not about, lavish gifts and lavish celebrations. It's not about that whatsoever. So that's an argument that's made that, is it not just a secular practice now? That argument also does not hold water. And the reason why I say it does not hold water is because when a person celebrates something, then the basis of its celebration is not necessarily on the person's intention. The basis of the celebration is on the actual act itself. Let me give you an example. Eid comes around obviously twice a year. And when Eid comes around, there's many Muslims now, this is nothing just restricted to Christianity, but within Islam, or within Muslims rather, you will see many Muslims who may not fast the 29, 30 days of Ramadan. They may just give up on something. They may say, I'll just give some fidya, or I'll do X, or I'll do Y. But when it comes to Eid, they will celebrate it. And in reality, they will say we're not necessarily celebrating as a religious act. We're celebrating because it's a time for family to come together. It's a time because all our family members are Muslim. We also have some connection with Islam. So it's a time where we can, share festivities and celebrate. However, even though that may be the person's intention, the act is still obviously a religious act, because it's being fixed to, associated with that particular day. So therefore, when it's around that period, if somebody decided to celebrate Christmas, for example, in the middle of, say, October, and just said, well, it's a secular practice, and it's something where it's a means for people of no faith or different faiths to come together, and at least, it brings communities together. But when it's being associated with a day, then that clearly shows the significance of that day more than any other day, and that becomes problematic. Many of us have those kind of similar conversations when it comes to, say, Mother's Day or buying Easter eggs around the time of Easter. Now, clearly, Easter eggs may not be widely available in shops or in markets, whatever. But when it comes around Easter time, they're available. So people don't buy the eggs there because they're obviously celebrating Easter. That's the time to buy it. So we need to distinguish that period compared to this, where we're speaking, where a person is actually celebrating that particular day. Furthermore, even if we accept that, there is obviously an understanding we have within the Sharia, which is called tashabbuh. And tashabbuh is what's referred to as assimilation. And we hear from the Prophet of Allah who says that man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum, that person who assimilates with the people, then they are of them. So if we look at, whenever we see, especially after the first sort of 12 months or 16 months or so after Hijrah, we see the Prophet ﷺ making great strides and great effort in trying to separate Muslims from non-Muslims, particularly when it comes to acts of celebration and when it comes to acts of worship, and when it comes to act of dress. So for instance, we know that the mushrikun, the polytheists, would also wear a turban, an amama, as we say in Arabic. Okay. However, they would wear it without a hat underneath. So Muslims were encouraged to wear it with a hat. Why? To differentiate them from the mushrikun. Similarly, we see that when the Prophet of Allah arrived in Medina, and the people were celebrating the fact that Musa والسلام, rescued his people from Fir'aun, they were celebrating it, the Jews in Medina, by fasting on the day of Ashura. So when the Prophet of Allah inquired and asked, why is it that you're fasting on the day of Ashura? And they explained to the Prophet of Allah that this was the day that we received salvation, our people received salvation, we were freed from the bondage of slavery. So as a way, we express gratitude to Allah and we fast on this day. So the Prophet of Allah said that, that obviously we are more entitled to this day than anybody else because we are the true followers of Musa salam. So we will also fast on this day. However, in order to differentiate ourselves from the Jewish people, because the day it was the same day, we will join a day before or join a day after. So when people say, oh, are you also Jews? They would say, no, we're not, because we're fasting today as well, the 9th, for example, or we're fasting tomorrow, the 11th. So as a result, they would differentiate. We see, for example, the Prophet of Allah encouraging to pray salah with shoes on, when obviously the masjid is made of such a way that there is no carpet, for example, on the ground, like the masjid was in the time of the Prophet where there was mud. It was a mud floor. And therefore, it wasn't as though there was fancy carpets like we have in masjids nowadays. So the Prophet of Allah would say that if your sandals are clean, if your shoes are clean, then you may pray. Why? To differentiate from the Jewish people, because the Jewish people remove their shoes when they pray salah. And similarly, when it comes to, say, for instance, dyeing the beard, when the beards would become gray as men would become older, the Jewish people would let their beards become gray and become white. Whereas the Prophet encouraged his companions that color your beards, dye them, with a khitab or something in order to change its color. And this was something which was encouraged. Why? To differentiate yourself from the Jewish people. Now, sometimes, unfortunately, some of individuals who adopt a very extreme understanding see this as some kind of hatred or see this as some kind of dislike of the Jewish people. That couldn't be further from the truth. Absolutely not. We know, for example, that the Prophet ﷺ, when he passed away, his armor was still left as rahan in the possession of a Jewish chap, which he had collected. There's ikhtilaf in the riwayat whether it was 50 sa of wheat. So the Prophet of Allah engaged, did business, trusted Jewish people like he trusted anybody else. However, when it came to religious identity, he was absolutely clear that we Muslims need to stand differently. So therefore, when it comes to Muslims celebrating around the period of Christmas in a similar manner, whether it's exchanging gifts, exchanging Christmas cards, whether it's putting a Christmas tree in one's house, then this is what's called tashabbuh. This is a religious act. It continues to be a religious act. And even if secular Christians or individuals who are pretty much secular but have a Christian background are claiming it's no longer, that does not change. That would be like, for example, a Muslim saying that Eid no longer has a religious significance to me, but I celebrate it because obviously family members celebrate it. That would not change because Eid would continue to have a religious effect or a religious standing. It would only be if scholars came out or rabbis came out or the Christian clergy came out and said, now as of today, Christmas is no longer a religious day or a religious period. It is now a secular period. We now abandon this 25th or any days around that period as a religious act. So that's what, and we've not heard that. So I hope just in that small introduction, Sajid Bhai, you're still with us and you've not bailed out on me, that you would have, that the listeners and the viewers would also get a good idea where I have tackled the three arguments. That is, it wasn't a religious act. That was point number one. Point number two, it ceases to be a religious act. And point number three, which is that Muslims are not only encouraged, but absolutely made compulsory upon them to differentiate when it comes to periods of festivals, when it comes to religious practices, and when it comes to religious celebrations. Muslims must be distinctly different. Why must they be distinctly different? Before I hand over to our host again, they must be distinctly different because we bring a different message. If we become like everybody else, then our message does not become like anybody else. We have now kind of watered down our message. Our message is quite clear, and that message is, this is the true way of life. Islam is the true way of life. And in order for people to say, oh, you are different, you don't celebrate Christmas, why is that? That brings an invitation to say, because we are Muslim. Oh, what is a Muslim? And that starts a dialogue. But if Muslims now celebrate whatever, say Christians are celebrating, then there's no distinction drawn anymore. That distinction doesn't need to be drawn when it's things of a nationalistic perspective or community orientated, because then we are citizens sharing in the same community. So whether they become certain laws which will benefit everybody, or certain practices which will benefit anybody that have no impact on religion whatsoever, then not only should we partake, we should be leaders in that as well, in order to show that Islam has this aspect to it, in order to ensure that there's goodness for everybody. So I hope that just serves as a short introduction, inshallah, for the topic itself, before maybe we can explore some questions.
Jazakallah khairan, Mufti Saab, for giving us that intro and brief introduction. There is a chat box within the Zoom, somewhere along the bottom, if you can see in your screens. Since this topic was being advertised, Mufti Saab, a number of questions have been coming in prior to this. But what I would like to do is open up to those audiences that have joined us via Zoom. Within the chat section, if you can post your questions there, and then what I would like to do, Mufti Saab, is to go through some real practical challenges that we have, what many Muslims face during their, especially this type of a season, through their work, schools, colleges, universities. Even recently, as you know, London has gone into Tier 4. There are several activities that are happening within our area. Muslims have got several questions on whether or not we should participate or not participate. So so if we can have questions, please put on the chat, and I will pick a question that has come in prior to what we have come in prior to this while it was being advertised. So one of the questions, is it allowed, before I start, can people start posting questions in chat, and I will start looking at them to see what we can ask Mufti Saab.
And if I may just add, rather than asking the questions to me privately, which means only I can see them, if they're made public or asked to the host, then that will be easy, because I'm not checking the questions. The host will be checking the questions and putting the questions to me.
Yes, please. Thank you for the reminder. Here's one question. Is it okay to sing Christmas songs? They don't have music. And I believe this has come from a parent who obviously has children, and he's been asking that question.
I went to school many, many years ago, in the 70s and in the 80s. And in the 70s, we used to sing all sorts of songs in the morning without really realizing what it is we were actually singing. So whether it was Kumbaya or the rest of it, And obviously, unfortunately, our parents were immigrants in the sense of the language perspective. Not unfortunately they were immigrants, but unfortunately, because they were immigrants, they didn't understand the language. So they weren't aware of what was actually being taught and what was actually being said. Now, remember, when an act of worship, okay, with Christianity in particular, it's kind of more what you would call ritual acts have become more fluid. Okay, and when I say Christianity, there's numerous sects within Christianity. So I'm generalizing, particularly when I'm talking about Church of England, because obviously we are in the UK, and this is just another act of worship. So an act of worship doesn't, like when we recite the Quran, for example, that's an act of worship. If we want to sing a nasheed in which we praise the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that's an act of worship. If we wish to sing a hymn in which we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's an act of worship. Now, so if this hymn or this song is about Allah and there's no shirk in it, or there's no ascribing something in there which is theistically a problem for us, then there's no harm in it. But unfortunately, not everybody is fully aware of the kind of theological impact. That when I speak about, I'm speaking here about aqaid, about beliefs, what beliefs we are supposed to have about the Dhat and the Sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What can we say about him? What can't we say about him? So therefore, because we're not going to be, especially our children, not going to be aware, it would make more sense that we do not partake in these activities based on religious grounds. However, if we're somewhat more learned or we're somewhat more aware, then we can take a more nuanced approach in that those songs, if you want to use that word, which are praising Allah, that, oh Allah, you are so great. Oh God, even if we use the word God, oh God, you are so great. Oh God, you are so fantastic. Oh God, you give to all. Then there's no harm in that. Okay. There's no problems associated with that. We are just praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when it has a Christian element to it and things of that nature, then we need to refrain. Even having said that, because this is not normally our way of praising Allah, it's not normally our way of extolling his virtues, then there's still an area of grayness. So my final answer would be, because these are in the formative years of our children, assuming that's where the question has come from, because these are in the formative years of our children, then they should be avoided, because religion, especially in the formative years, should be as clean as possible in order for the child to fully understand and appreciate that we are different than others when it comes to our faith. We are same when it comes to, talking about the football match. We are the same when it comes to ensuring crime is removed from our streets. We're the same when it comes to all these other matters. We agree on virtually everything from a human perspective. We also, from a religious perspective, also agree with issues like your honesty and fairness and all the rest of it, justice, that all religions have. But when it comes to the way we express it, then our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has given us a distinct way to express it, and we must adhere to that way.
Okay, I'll pick another question out here. Is it okay to wear Christmas type of like the red hat, the Santa Claus hat, during like a video call, or decorate my desk with tinsels, just to make it feel like with my colleague or my my neighbors that I'm not just to be a part of it. I'm not being involved, but is this something I can do?
The issue that we have, if I go back to the kind of short, bayan I did earlier, it goes back to what it is we're doing and what are we celebrating. So even though this may be now identified, particularly by even non-Muslims, as a more of a secular act now, it's not a religious act, and we just want to kind of show that we're kind of on the same page, then it is still problematic because of the fact that it is still, even though some may wish to identify as a secular act, it is still a religious act. And in this way, what we are doing is we are sort of partaking in a religious act which we're sharing with people who are not of our religion. That is obviously problematic. Islam has a pretty zero tolerance for doing things together with other faiths. That's not because Islam's kind of is just looking for trouble, so to speak, or people who adhere to Islam. It's because Islam, when it comes to religion, wants to remain distinctively clear from all other faiths. Why? So that the word of Tawheed, the truth, because obviously as Muslims we believe that Islam is the true religion, and Allah's book, the Quran, is the last revealed text, and it is the perfected and protected text without the introduction of human activity, whether it comes to interpretive models or whether it comes to be changing, then we know this is the final religion. Being the final religion, we cannot confuse, because look at it from a perspective of a non-Muslim, they will start to see that, okay, Muslims are allowed to celebrate. When you have these conversations, particularly with reverts, then they start to see that, oh, so you actually can celebrate because I've got a Muslim friend at work and he does X or he does Y and does Z. So you can celebrate it. We need to be quite clear in that. So it's not as though we're party poopers, or it's not as though we just got, we're a bit stuck up. It's because clearly this is a religious festival and we cannot partake in that religious festival.
Okay. A question that has come in into the chat. Can we have roast dinner on Christmas? And I think that question really is coming from where it's a national holiday. The whole of UK is off. I'm going to invite my family around. Can I have a roast on that particular day? But it happens to fall on Christmas Day.
The thing is, with the back end of that question, Sajid Bhai, you said it just happens to fall on Christmas Day.
No,
It's
So
yeah,
sorry, what I meant by is,
yeah.
as Christmas is a
But
national
what I
holiday.
mean is that because it is on Christmas Day, that's what it makes it problematic. It is when we start to honor a particular day and we have no evidence to honor a particular day in order to express gratitude to Allah, then that's when it becomes problematic. If we express gratitude to Allah every day of the year, then it's not a problem. But if we say, you know what, on this particular day, on the 25th, we're going to celebrate and express our gratitude to Allah by getting the family together, eating food. And then that day is not just by coincidence, just the day that Muslims decide to do. It is also the day that Christians are doing exactly the same thing. That's what makes it problematic. If a person says that when I go to my local Muslim store, and that's the only time that they have turkeys in, they don't have turkeys throughout the year, and I have turkey available. And if a person buys a turkey and decides to eat it on the 21st, 22nd, 29th, 27th, 28th, then there's some gunjaish there. There's some, possibility of accepting that and saying that doesn't seem to be problematic. To do it on that with that particular practice is seriously problematic.
So just rewinding back slightly, Mufti Sahib. So what we are saying here is, as you know, 25th of December is a national holiday. We know our local butchers is open. I might go there on the day before and pick up a chicken, and I might want to have a roast chicken and then decide to call one of my cousins or my brother over, and just to say, hey, come and join in for a meal in the evening. Although this is not celebrating Christmas.
It's not. But when there's any possibility of doubt or waham, then that person should remove that. Let's also bear in mind, as grown adults, those of us who have had our formative years in Islamic institutes here, we've been to a maktab, our parents have been obviously migrants here. They have a completely different understanding of Christmas compared to say we have, because their workmates weren't non-Muslim. And we grew up in that mindset. We can draw a complete distinction between what is okay, what is not okay. What we fail to realize is the effect that's having on our children. And the example I give, and I think this will probably apply to many of the questions which will come up, is that, if I give you an example, the way shirk came about didn't just kind of happen overnight. I'll give you, they were all baby steps. And the baby steps were very innocent baby steps. So, for example, a pious person would die. So what they would do is when a pious person would die, they would pay an artist for the artist to draw a picture of that pious person. And they would place that picture in a separate room where people would go and say, oh, this is pious person, Joe Blogs, and this is pious person, so and so. So people would remember those pious people, and their virtues were mentioned, that he used to do X, he used to do Y, and that was all fine. Then what happened is the next step was, a few generations after was, let's not just stick to pictures. Why don't we make a statue out of this person so that at least we can really visualize a 3D image of this person? So that's what they did. Again, innocent baby step. So they made a nice statue of this person, and then they made that. Then generations went on, and then people said, if I stand next to the statue and pray to Allah, with the view that I'm praying to Allah, I'm not praying to the statue, but through the barakah of the statue, of barakah of the person, maybe my du'as will be accepted. So they just made dua to Allah, but just stood next to the statue. Next generations which came along misunderstood that, and then they turned to pray to the statue, and then you had idol worship. So before you knew it, you went from a monotheistic faith to blatant idol worship. Well, that happened over several generations. So you'll see, for example, if you drive around, in particular Muslim areas, you would never see a Christmas tree, you would never see tinsel, you would never see anything of that sort whatsoever back in the 70s and the 80s, and even in the 90s. But what you're starting to see now is that is being, what we call the kind of pacification of the Sharia, the kind of making things permissible. So we are here now 10 generations later, 5 generations later, 20 generations later, will continue to take those baby steps. So when it comes to faith, we make a clear distinction about, what's Islam and what isn't. And that has to be kept apart as much as possible. So even something as innocent as buying a turkey or something on the 24th, and this and it's permissible to buy a turkey. It's not impermissible, but then calling on the people on the 25th and gathering people together and then eating roast bread, this starts to get into an area which is seriously problematic. Maybe not so much for the adults that are there, but particularly for the next generation that's watching.
Okay, thank you, Jazak. I think that's quite important to really understand. I think many of us get lost in that understanding. We don't look at the future, we only look at the current. Okay, opening up to another question that's come in. What is the guidance on saying Merry Christmas or similar greetings to one's neighbors or colleagues?
When it comes to, giving glad tidings to non-Muslims, then in the general sense, we can give glad tidings. We can make dua for things for them in the world. So we can say, I wish you have a good day. I wish you become more, rich. You can say good things to your fellow colleagues, and there's no harm or anything wrong in it. What obviously we can't say is for deceased is, and that are known to have passed away and not accepted the faith. Obviously, that's something we don't know. But their acceptance of the faith has to be public as well. Not that, oh, I'm going to make dua for that person because you never know, he might have accepted Islam. Somebody passes away, Diego Maradona passed away recently, and there were people putting in rest in peace. And they say, oh, and somebody said, well, you can't say that, brother. And he says, well, how do you know he didn't accept Islam? Well, you don't. And you can say that for everybody. But his acceptance of Islam must be obvious, like his denial. So we can only go by the obvious. So because obviously so-and-so didn't accept Islam, we can't make dua for him to say, rest in peace. Rest in peace is only those we can say for the believers, that, Ya Allah, give him peace in his grave, give him peace on the day of resurrection. How can we make a dua for a person who has denied Allah all their lives, who have broken all his laws all their lives, and then we ask for peace for them? So, but in the dunya we can, okay, we can make dua and say, may Allah give you hidayah, grant you. You don't have to say, may Allah make you a Muslim. We can say, may Allah open your eyes to the truth, and just keep it general. So when it comes to, again, and I keep going back to the point so that people understand where my thinking is coming from, because it's a religious act and it continues to be a religious act, to ask somebody to celebrate a religious act, which we know to be wrong from the Muslim perspective, whether we look at it from the belief system that Isa alayhi salatu wasalam was a son of God, or he was, God incarnate or whatever, we obviously categorically deny that as Muslims. We would say this is, this is blasphemous. This is, stating something about Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, which is completely untrue, which he himself did not say. How can we then say, may you enjoy that period? That would be like sort of saying, it's something we would not say, basically. It's wrong. You can say, have an enjoyable holiday, or, we hope you have a good time. But then again, is, what our intentions are when we say that. Generalizing, obviously, but many non-Muslims would prefer to drink, be merry, maybe, get involved in certain relationships during the kind of Christmas period. So what are we actually encouraging people to do? I hope you carry on drinking. Is that something really Muslims should be encouraging non-Muslims to do? We should be encouraging Muslims to do that, and not Muslims. So one can say, I pray you have a good holiday, and there's nothing wrong in that. And the question which comes up, which again is going to be applicable to many of these questions, is, and this is something we also need to take home, is that surely around Christmas period, that shouldn't be a time where your work colleague finds out that you're Muslim. If that's the time that they found out that you're Muslim, that your Muslim has been so hidden, that your Muslimness has been so concealed, that they did not know that you don't celebrate Christmas, that you don't do this, you don't do that, you don't eat pork, they have not known this, and now suddenly you kind of break it to them and say, oh, I know you're giving me a champagne bottle of alcohol, because I get these kind of questions that if a work colleague gives me some alcohol, can I give it to my next door neighbor who's a non-Muslim? Really, if your work colleagues are finding out on Christmas Day or around Christmas period that Muslims don't drink alcohol, then your dawah has not really been pretty useful over the period. A Muslim should be distinct. And I think this is the way we look, the way we dress, the way we behave, the language that we use. We kind of, again, try to conceal our identity to kind of fit in. We want to fit in. We don't want to stick out. We want everybody to say that we're the same. But that's not what Islam is about. Islam is distinct. Islam is different. We're supposed to look different. We're supposed to eat differently. We're supposed to answer the call of nature differently, for crying out loud. We're supposed to do all these things differently. But because particularly within the Western world, religion is a private affair, it's not a public affair, we've also kind of bought into that. And we think, religion is something you just talk about at home. It's not something you overtly do. Maybe ulama overtly do it, but Joe Public don't. That's not the case. That applies to everybody. All your work colleagues should know that you're a Muslim. They should know what a Muslim can and can't do. They should know. It should be quite clear right from the word go. So then even if you didn't say, because they say, oh, yeah, but my work colleague will find it offensive if I don't say Merry Christmas. But why would they? Don't you find it offensive that they expect you to say it? Why is the offense only one way? Surely the offense should be on you as well, that you feel that you have to tell someone. And then the other question which comes in as well, or the other kind of response is, yeah, but when it comes to Eid, they give us Eid celebrations. They say, have a happy Eid. So that does not mean just because another faith decides to do something, because its faith allows it, that we also reciprocate that. Our faith doesn't allow it. That person's faith may allow it, or that person's way of life may allow it. So a secularist, for example, he says, live and let live. So, do what you like. I'm not got no qualms about it. So that person will find it comfortable to say, have a happy Eid, or have a happy Christmas, or have a happy this, have a happy the other. Our religion doesn't allow it. So we can't reciprocate that. So it's these kind of things that we need to also explore. Like I said, our religion is very kind of, fundamental, and I use that word intentionally. It's quite fundamental in how it wishes to be perceived by the rest of the world. It does not want to just be a small voice that's just not heard. It needs to be a loud, clear voice, and that responsibility falls on all Muslims. Especially if we make the argument that we want to continue to live as minorities in the UK, in the West, then we must always have the intention that we are making dawah. Because the question could then arise that if you feel your religion is escaping from your fingertips, if you feel you cannot practice your religion openly, if you feel your religion is under threat, or if you feel your identity is under threat, then why would you continue to live in an environment where you feel like that? You shouldn't feel like that. And obviously Muslims here in the UK have no reason to feel like that. We can see the problems that are going on in France, for example, and we've seen it going on in Belgium and in the Northern Europe, in the Netherlands, however. But in the UK, we've not come across that whatsoever. Yes, I appreciate there are certain examples which we can quote, but I'm trying to put it into the bigger scheme of things, whether you look at Rohingya, China, and the rest of it, how communities of our majorities are starting to look at their Muslim minorities and how they're dealing with them. In that picture, we are quite free to practice our faith. So a detailed answer, but I'm trying to answer in such a way, Sajid Bhai, that it hits numerous other questions in kind of a general way.
Sure. So Mufti, if you can just briefly summarize, as it is the festive season, we do have neighbors that we live amongst. If we cannot say Merry Christmas because of the connection with the religious element, what would you gave a couple of suggestions on passing, or again, to summarize, what would be a good thing to say without being offensive, but at the same time you don't want to be seemed, that they are celebrating something, whether they're religious or not, they're secular or not. If they've said something to you, oh, Merry Christmas, you want to be able to respond to them.
Yeah.
Nicely.
I would say if somebody said to you, Happy Hanukkah, Sajid Bhai, somebody said to you, Happy Hanukkah, what would you say? Would you say that, hold on, I'm not a Jew?
Yeah.
Or if somebody said, Happy Diwali, Sajid Bhai, oh, Sajid, Happy Diwali. Yeah. Is a white chap, for example, indigenous white chap at your work, and you've got a Hindu friend at work as well. So he says to, I don't know, the Hindu chap, Happy Diwali. Then he turns to you, oh, Sajid, Happy Diwali. Will you not say, actually, Peter, I'm not Hindu. Okay, I'm Muslim, so I don't celebrate Diwali. Would you not say that? Or would you say, actually, yeah, I accept that. Happy Diwali to you as well, Peter? You wouldn't, you would correct him. So similarly, we feel because Christmas is a majority position, and the minorities always want to fit in. It's a psychological thing. We would not have the same issue with Jewish proclamations or Hindu or Sikh or anything like that. We would correct that in a respectful manner. We would say, oh, with all due respect, I don't mean to offend, but I'm not Sikh, or I'm not X, or I'm not Y. But when it comes to a majority position, we feel obliged to fit in. It's the kind of, brown man syndrome. We just don't want to kind of rock the boat a little bit. We just think, best stay quiet and just respond likewise. I gave two responses to that side. One was that it shouldn't get to Christmas before people start finding out that you don't celebrate Christmas. That should be known with folk. And that only happens because we don't overtly show our faith. So that's point number one. Point number two, you can say general things that, have a happy holiday period or all the rest of it. So you can make it general. There's no harm in wishing people a good holiday, with your intention being that I'm saying that this person might read about Islam or find out about Islam and might be productive for them. That's fine. If you have that intention, then inshallah, that's something that you can do. But like I said, I would have looked at issue number one way before somebody saying to me, Happy Hanukkah. Oh, sorry, I'm not Jewish. Happy Diwali. Oh, I'm not Hindu. I would easily, or I'm sure many of us who are listening here would easily correct a work colleague if they were to say Happy Diwali or something like that, but find it a little difficult when they were to say Happy Christmas, for example.
Okay. I'll ask another question here, and I think it has come from a parent. And then what I will do, Mufti Saab, is I will also go to a question that's coming, through email. So here's a question from a parent. Can I ask? Hold on, there's another one here. Is it permissible for my son to sing Xmas songs in nursery and be involved in the nativity play? So this is again, as a parent, we've sent our child to nurseries like a majority of the Muslim parents do. There's a lot of activities being done through a nativity, Christmas carols. He's only a 3-year-old. Even up, is that permissible?
If you want a short answer, then that would be no, it's not. A slightly longer version is that, going to one of my earlier answers, these are the formative periods of our children. Many people, I can't remember exactly where I read this, but a person's personality is pretty much formed by the time they're 6, 7, 8 years old. Okay, so the child psychology means that by the time they're hitting 6, 7, 8, you are what you are. You just become a bigger version of it as you get older. But you are either short-tempered, not short-tempered, what you perceive as the outside world. You've already kind of worked out the world around you. You spend the first few years trying to ascertain that. What this does, obviously, is particularly in the formative years, it expresses an understanding of religion, of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, which is not a true version. So what this does is, and especially if this young child is going to maktab or is learning something at home, if they're not, it's even worse. But if they're learning something at home, then what they do is they start to live dual lives. A lot of and this is a more of a social issue that we have as well. Young ladies at home will behave in a certain way, but when they go to school, college, they'll behave in a different way. For instance, when it comes to people who have learned evolution in school, and then they have the Adam and Hawa alayhi salatu wasalam, they kind of separate these two and say, when I go to maktab and I go home, then it's Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam. But really what happened was we evolved from an ape-like creature, and this was by, survival of the fittest and all the rest of it. And this is where our beginnings are. So this has a massive impact on a child. And again, a person may say, yes, but, should I just take my child out? If I was to take my child out, then this poor child is sat in a room all on their own. Question I would have is that, would you be putting your child in a nursery in which there was no other Muslim in that environment? Surely that is such a challenge to their identity that it will change them the way they are. And this is key about their identity. Now, we sometimes prefer good education over identity. We say, well, yeah, I know that they'll have issues for this child to deal with, and we'll have problems about assembly and when it comes to halal food and this and music and whatever. But hey, we'll ride the storm. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's a good school. Okay. So identity becomes secondary and schooling becomes primary. But what happens is when that child becomes a young adult and eventually becomes a fully grown adult, they also put religion in place 2, place 3, place 4 behind them, education or social standing, because really education is an extension or a manifestation of social standing. That's really what it is. The higher educated you are, the more you feel you are socially more affluent, more better than the next man. So what this does, it breeds a certain type of superiority kind of understanding, and the religion now is right. So now suddenly we say, oh, better come on, let's pray Salah. You know what? How does that benefit me? All my life, what has benefited me is revising, working hard, and passing exams, and I've done that. I've worked for that. So it becomes a lot of Allah kind of becomes out of the picture. I've worked for this, I deserve this. So really what we're doing is we're fermenting these ideas in a child at a very young age, and this will make things problematic. So that was a slightly longer version. Don't know, you can take your choice, either the short version or the long version.
Okay. I've got a question here on the chat, which also ties in with a question that we received prior. So I'll tie these two things together. And I think you touched on it before, and that's regarding clothing. Again, they both come from parents. It looks like it's both come from parents. The idea is, and we're now moving up to primary school. Again, there's a lot of activities happening within school. Can the child or the grown-up wear a certain attire where it might be, I believe it's said it, an Xmas jumper day in school? So all you're doing is your child wears nothing that says anything to do with Christmas on it, but you might wear a jumper that might be red, green, and so on and so forth. Is that permissible?
This would come really when it comes to kind of educating the child on what's going on. You see, if the child is wearing this, and this is again about how the school perceives it and what type of school you have. Sometimes schools will expect children to join in the festivities of other religions. It depends how that school is. You see, some schools will say that when it comes to the Christian faith, and that will be given a priority because we live in England, but when it comes to other faiths, we won't necessarily practice them. So, when it comes to around Eid time, would there be an expectation on all the pupils to celebrate Eid, whether they be, non-Muslim, in the sense that whether they're from other minority faiths or whether they are Christian faith? So you'd have to look at each school and what it's doing. If they were, if they can avoid that process, then that's what they should do. They should say, look, it's quite clear that my child can't partake in any of the festivities. And that should be, again, as I say, very early on, when my children started in a primary school, then the first conversation I had with the head teacher and my wife had with the head teacher was explaining our vision, was explaining our beliefs, was explaining who we are. But it wasn't done in a condescending, arrogant, I'm telling you what I want my child. What it wasn't. It was done in a mutual, cooperative, kind of in a decent way, where we were respecting what they were trying to do, and they could clearly respect what we were trying to do. So once we had that conversation early on, then alhamdulillah, all three of my children went through the same primary school. So we were there probably over a period of nearly 15 years or 14 years because of the age difference between my children, and we had the same level of quality of education. At the same time, none of their education was impacted whatsoever. Also, at the same time, they were able to avoid certain circumstances. Now, sometimes we say that, yeah, but if all the Muslims would come together, unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Many Muslims had no issue with celebrating Christmas, engaging in the nativity play and all the rest of it. And that's, each person has their own choice and their own prerogative. We are free to choose. What we want to do is who we take advice from and whose decision we go by. And then obviously how we're going to be questioned on the day of judgment. And those of us who take our afterlife seriously and those who take our day-to-day practices seriously will have that conversation. So really, again, what I'm saying is, and I said this earlier, is if we're having these conversations around the Christmas time, then obviously there are some serious issues. Why are we having them now? This is when it gets confrontational. Those conversations should have been had in a non-confrontational, well before the event type of thing. So then when it comes nearer the time, it doesn't become awkward. So anything in which it's a festival, celebration of a festival, something in which we're giving a green light that we can do that, then there's no then we cannot grant permissibility to it, and that should be avoided in all circumstances for that very reason.
So just to extend that, Mufti Saab, so the idea is most schools are now secular and not Christian based, majority of the primary schools, and what they adopt is a very large, broad festive. So they will do Diwali, they will do Eid, they'll do Hanukkah, they'll do Christmas. And the expectation from a secular school, as you can appreciate, coming from an academic and being a principal of a school, the secular approach is where all children should participate in all of these activities. So if you can rewind back slightly, what you're saying is that it should be avoided to avoid confusion to the child.
There's no harm in learning about other faiths. That's never been a harm. I would find it uncomfortable for that to happen in the formative years. Okay, I appreciate we live in a secular country. I appreciate many of us send our children to state schools. That's the downside of that. When you don't send your child to a private school, that is the downside for it, is that obviously being a secular state, they consider all religions to be equal. Islam does not consider all religions to be equal. Then let's just get that out there. It does not. Islam considers only Islam to be correct and all other religions to be wrong. It does not necessarily mean then that everybody has to accept Islam in the sense that, we compel people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives people a choice. You are free to choose. But in the formative years, when a child is basically struggling with the concepts of their own religion, then when you start to get all these alternatives, it can confuse. Imagine if I was to say, and I appreciate, and I'm pushing this to the kind of a exaggerated end in order just to make my point. But imagine a religion where you could eat what you want, dress how you like, go where you like, whatever. Wouldn't that be quite appealing to a young child? That hold on, our religion is quite strict, and I've heard this from young people. They'll say, "Oh, Islam is very strict. We can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do this." Christianity actually is okay. And as soon as you start saying these things, okay, your own aqidah is now heading in a very dangerous place. And this is really the aim of the schools is to try to minimize problems and extremism within people, so that they look at all faiths as equal. There, as I said, that there's no issue from an Islamic perspective in doing that. The issue comes is when we're encouraging children to engage in those particular practices, when we're actually telling them that this is something that you must do, that you must now, cross yourselves or do this or do that. Because a nativity play basically is the so-called reenaction of the birth of Christ and how it happened and what they went through and all the rest of it. So this is obviously, and you have children playing the roles of Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam, and then obviously Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam suddenly has a husband or a man in her life, and then they have a child, and then this is being explained to children. This is giving a complete, and some of our children unfortunately don't go to maktab, so they're not getting. And sometimes those of us who go to a maktab in which is just focused on alif ba ta and nothing really on theological issues. So the child never receives, and this is why our reaction to when somebody says something blasphemous against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our reaction is very different when it's said against Isa alayhi salam. So there was a play, I think it was running in Glasgow fairly recently, in which Isa alayhi salam, aliyadu billah, was being portrayed as a homosexual man, and that was running, and there was no bat of an eyelid from the Muslim community at all. And and then when we see the Hebdo cartoon caricatures, whatever, there's a reaction. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm happy that there is a reaction, not one which obviously is an extreme one, but then that reaction should also be there when it's Isa alayhi salam or Musa alayhi salam. But we've been conditioned now to accept that Isa alayhi salam is not really our prophet. He really belongs to the Christians, so they'll defend him. When really every Nabi is obviously ours, and we have to take ownership of that. That we take ownership of that. So, but when you're instilling these kind of things in a young child, it has an impact.
Okay, Mufti Saab, I'm not sure about the other audiences, but your voice was crackling and coming in and out. So,
okay, is it better now?
It's better now, yes.
Okay, maybe old age.
Okay, no, it's technology. Okay, here's another question. I'm going to tie the two questions up. The question is, can I hold on, can I give something to my neighbors, a gift, with a happy holiday during the winter holidays and not on Christmas Day, so a day before or a day after? And I'll tie this with the question, at work they play Secret Santa. Can I buy gifts? Again, this is not done on Christmas Day. So I think the question around here is doing gifts.
See, exchanging of gifts is something we do around Eid time, and it's a show of expression of love, of solidarity, of people who share the same faith as you. And what you're doing is you're trying to bring those ties closer together. When we're bringing ties closer together with non-Muslims, then we should give them the greatest gift, and that greatest gift is of bringing them towards Islam. We've put that as a second, as I keep saying, religion now plays a second, third place. Our social engagement is more important. Our education is becoming more important. When we're engaging with anybody, religion should be the key factor. Our religion should always be at the fore of our mind. When we're going somewhere, wait a minute, what does Islam say about this? When we're doing something, whoa, what does Islam say about this? But because that's not the main thing on our mind anymore, it's either education, we want our kids to do well, it's either money oriented, we don't want to be seen bad by the neighbors. There's always some other pretext, there's always some other thing. So there's nothing wrong in sharing gifts around Ramadan time. When we're breaking fast and we give food out to our Muslim neighbors, give food out to your non-Muslim neighbors. So they ask you, whoa, what's going on today? Well, today is Ramadan has started, and we like to share gifts with family and friends and neighbors, and do that. We can keep our own religious distinct and still remain respectful to one another. This is the key message I'm trying to get across here. There is no need for us to amalgamate religions in order to respect one another. We can identify for who we are, but still have the mutual respect. So whenever I engage with people either of different faiths or people of no faiths, then I clearly try to give I try my best to come across as somebody who respects them as a human, has common decency and all the rest of it. But I will remain distinct that this is something which, I identify with and you won't. So when it comes to either things of gifts of this nature, should not be done in this time of the period at all. Give them during Eid time, give them during Ramadan time, give them during Qurbani time. That's when we give. That's our time. Don't expect them to give to you. If they want to give something to you around their period, then you can accept it. There's no harm. So if somebody wants to come around Christmas or before, and even say, look, we're celebrating Christmas, we brought you some cookies. Okay, fine, mashallah. As long as they know that what you eat and what you can't eat, then there's no harm in doing so. But keep our faiths distinct. You're muted there, Sajid bhai.
Yep, sorry. Here is another question. Again, it's a Christmas Day question, and I'm assuming this is coming from a parent, and this is not from the chat, is can we play party games on Christmas Day because Eid is boring? I'm assuming this has probably come from a youngster, because
you hope so, Sajid bhai. That's what
well, I'll extend it.
Yeah, I think this is a very good question though, Sajid bhai, because what it does open up is.
Can I just?
Sorry.
Extend it. I know the question is really, can we do those party games? On Eid Day is boring. All we do on Eid Day is eat, wear clothes, and see the same people we see every day.
Okay, so it didn't sound any better when you added the last bit to it, Sajid bhai, but I'm glad you did. What I would say is this, and this is a new area that we're kind of getting into, and this is what I've spoke about, is the alternative, is when we're not offering an alternative to our youth, when we're not offering an alternative to young people, then yes, they will compare. And this is you've actually, by asking that question, Sajid bhai, you've kind of further supported the response I gave, I think, a couple of questions back, which was when you start to look at other faiths as a young person and you see, wow, Christians, they have Christmas, and look at the fun and games that they do. They have Boxing Day, and then look at New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Wow, man, that's like a top religion, yeah? And and this was an example, and you start to compare our religion, fasting, and going through difficulty, keeping a full beard, and and all the rest of it. You will clearly start to see that religion, Islam is difficult, and this is what then starts to seem the other things seem more attractive, and this is the danger, and this is why we don't want to kind of open those kind of doors up at a very early stage in a child's mind when they're going through formative years and they truly don't understand their faith. You only become, when you become mature, when you become an adult, you then start to see that I can make these types of sacrifices. When you're not a father, it's me, I. But when you become a father, you suddenly start sacrificing things that you never sacrificed as a single man. And you put up with a lot of more things that you wouldn't put up with as a single man. Why? Because you feel that there's a greater benefit by you doing that. And you may have had really high principled views, but then when you start seeing your children behaving in a certain way, you start to kind of become a little bit more lenient and a little bit more easy than you would have been, say, a few years back in terms of how you would approach things. So that's why it's essential that during the formative years, we obviously express our religion in a positive way. It is the responsibility of the parents initially to ensure that they make Eid a good day for the youngsters. Has to be, absolutely. I hear excuses when people explain their dastakhans on the time they break the fast and there's all the different things they eat. And I said, subhanAllah, you eat a lot, don't you? And they say, yeah, it's for the kids. And I said, what do you mean? It's to encourage them to keep fasting. Oh, I see. Okay. Then how come you eat all of it? How come the kids don't get a chance to eat it? So we got to make a little bit more of an effort. Also, at a community level, we need to make an effort. If we're living in Muslim majority places, which we do, Muslims are a strange minority in that they live as majorities, even though they're a minority. So why can't we, book out certain halls, book out certain events and hold these kind of family events? And this is a new area that Muslims need to move into eventually, is the so-called kind of entertainment area. And I say that with speech marks because it's a gray area and we need to be very careful what we legitimize and what we don't. And then make Eid a day that the children won't forget, rather than wearing new clothes, eating and seeing the same people.
Okay, here's another question that's come in. I've said no to my work colleagues about Christmas, and I said to them there's no halal food available. Then they ordered halal food for the Christmas party and then asked me to join along. So they've gone through the efforts of getting halal food for me. It's a Christmas function, not on Christmas Day. How do I respond?
It's just, ditto, Sajid Bhai. Why is it that people are finding out, or your work colleagues are finding out, that you don't celebrate Christmas around Christmas time? Why are they finding that out? If you've been working at that place for 6 months, 3 months, 9 months, 10 months, why are they finding out? A question I would say is, have you actually publicly prayed Salah in front of them? Probably not. Have you asked for an office space, to say that, I'd like some office space around these times? Why? Well, I pray 5 times a day. Okay. We just don't want to be awkward. We just kind of feel that, and this doesn't help us, you see. We feel awkward that by explaining our religious needs, we're being awkward. We're not. We have needs and they should be confidently expressed, not out of awkwardness. And you know what? You should work an extra half an hour. So then they think, hey, this guy does take a couple of extra breaks, but he gives it back to me and double as much. I want to go and employ another Muslim. Or your timekeeping is better, or you're more honest, or you're more fair, or whatever. So it's not about demanding, I need to pray, I need to break fast at this time, so I need to finish at 3:55 during the winter. Not just demanding, but also giving something back to the organization or to your work colleagues more than anybody else is getting back. That's the role model Muslims were supposed to be. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that's the role model he was. He may have put demands on the Meccan community, but he gave a lot more to the Meccan community than he put demands on them. A lot more. This is when Khadija radiallahu anha was consoling him after he came back from the cave and he'd met Jibreel alayhi salatu. The first thing she was to say to him was to remind him of his virtues. You keep blood ties, you look after the weak, you support, you're trustworthy, you're honest. None of these are actual religious acts in themselves. They are good human traits. So, these conversations need to be had before that. so this is why, you know, in a way I'm, you know, and you can see the way I'm answering these is that I'm being put in a circumstance and I have to respond to that circumstance. But what I'm saying, hopefully, and it's coming across, is that circumstance should never have existed. But we are making these circumstances, and then we are getting awkward, and then we are seen as being awkward, because instead of just blatantly saying something I can't do, the rest of the work colleagues are working around you so that it doesn't harm you in any way. And then if you still object, then you're seen as somebody who's just being an awkward so-and-so. So, you know, I say again, any type of celebration or anything around that type of time of period, which is to express some kind of excitement or whatever, is something that should be is frowned upon. If it is just an end of year celebration which goes on the 30th or whatever, it's a time, it's just a day in a calendar that we just fix at work, and we can just be, you know, relaxed, dressed down, call it what you like, and, you know, we'll just have a lunch together. Then one can see that there's no harm in that. But if, you know, we can't play with words. Remember, the first thing you've got to ask is your own heart. Everybody knows what's going on. No point saying, oh, well, Mufti Saab said that it's okay, so I'm good now. You know, here I go. You know, let me get back on the WhatsApp work group and say I'm in. And Mufti Saab said, yes, we all know what that day is. We all know what that gathering is for. And as Muslims, I've made it quite clear right from the word go, as Muslims, we need to express our identity, not in an assertive, aggressive, kind of patronizing, looking down, better than the approach. No, the way I've explained it hopefully has come across quite clearly. The way the Prophet ﷺ practiced it, very calm, very relaxed, and in fact, going out of your way to be an outstanding work colleague, or if you're in a school, to be an outstanding parent. So if I was a parent at school, and, you know, my children were there and I was putting demands on this school, I would volunteer my time. I would volunteer my time and maybe come into class and read books to the young children. So the school would say, okay, you know, Amjad has his demands and everything, but he's a really nice guy. You know, he comes in on Wednesdays and he reads to the kids. You know, what a nice guy. Your Muslimness is now no longer seen as a problem. Your Muslimness, okay, is seen as a positive thing. And we don't do that enough, okay? Our identity is a good thing, and we don't do it enough, and we've got to do more. So if you see, you know, the school, for example, has got snow outside of it, then the Muslim parents should all gather together and shovel it out of the way. And, you know, Muslim parents might say, well, why should we do it? Well, why shouldn't we? You are the best of communities. Is that why are you expecting somebody else to do it? You do it. And then, you know, yes, they do ask for salah. Yes, you know, they're asking for halal meat, but hey, we love Muslim parents. Why? They're out on winter cleaning up. Their parking is fantastic. Unfortunately, it's not. We know that. We know parking. You know, there you go. You're laughing. And, you know, we're the Muslim community, the best of communities that's taken out. We park when we want. So they'll say, hold on a second here. Does Islam allow you to do that? No, it doesn't. Oh, okay, so you can pick and choose, yeah? You can do certain things which is against your religion when it suits you. But then when it comes on to us, where you have expectations on anyone else, then you can. So, you know, it's you know, we are the way we are, if that makes sense.
Okay, Jazakallah for that as well. Here's a question from the chat. If we receive a Christmas present or a gift from, again, a colleague or a neighbor, what should we do? How do we respond to that?
If somebody gives you a gift who's a non-Muslim, then we can receive gifts from non-Muslims. There's no harm in that. One can receive it. We cannot reciprocate it. We should reciprocate it on our day. So when it's Eid day, or when it's Ramadan, or when it's day of Qurbani, there are many times where we are encouraged to share with our community, not just the Muslim community, but share with the community. We should pick those moments to share.
Okay, here's a question not from the chat. My neighbor has invited me for a dinner or a get-together. They've invited me, you know, the whole of my family. For them, it's Christmas. It may be Christmas, but they've called it just a get-together of neighbors. Is that okay for me to go and be neighborly?
If it's an event in which a person, as I said, has not fixed it on the 25th or whatever, just says that we're getting neighbors together and he expresses it as a means of saying it's just a neighborly sort of get together, then there's no harm in that. But if you can see that this is, you'd have to remember, you're making decisions on what we call something called ghalib al-dhan, which is the most probable scenario. No one can say yaqinan what people are doing unless they actually say it. Okay, we go by, what's the most probable outcome. We can only make decisions on most probable outcomes. I've said that, but then I would also add to that if we're invited, then if this is a chap that's been invited, then his wife will be invited. Okay, and then when we start to get couples mixing, now, if this is a ghair mahram, then how can a person take his wife over? Will they be drinking on the table? I guess so. Will they be serving pork on the table? I guess so. Will there be music going on? I guess so. So it's not specific to Christmas, but generally speaking, when we engage with non-Muslims, we cannot bend the Sharia just because we want to be neighborly or we want to be, no one has said that Islam is easy. Nobody has said that. Islam is difficult. It is supposed to be difficult. Okay? It said, ad-dunya sijnul mu'min. The world is a prison for the believer. Now, prison is not a place that we want to go to. A prison is something which has rules, laws. What happens in a prison? In a prison, you can't do what you want. You're told what time to wake up. You're told how to dress. You're told what you can eat. You're told when you can go to sleep. You're told what you have access to read. You're controlled about who you can see. All your human behavior is controlled. Islam controls every aspect of your human behavior. Why? Because that's what Allah wants. That's what he puts upon us once we accept him as our Allah. Once we accept him as our God, once we accept Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as our Nabi, then in that case, we have to adhere to what those instructions are. For that in return, what do we get? Jannah. That's what we get in return.
Okay, I think this next question is probably the right one to ask right now. If I or we can't celebrate Christmas, New Year's with our neighbors, we can't celebrate with them, we can't mix with them, etc., etc., what do we do? We are not monks. What can we do?
Well, obviously we're not monks because we're not Christians.
No, I understand that, but I think what the question is around more, we don't want to become across that we're completely isolated.
Yeah. So
everything else, no.
Who would we rather offend? Yeah. Who would we rather offend? That's the question I would put. Who would we rather offend? Would we rather offend Allah and his Prophet? Or would we rather offend our neighbors if they find that offensive? This is why I said, again, answering to numerous questions, that if things are explained to people, they will not find it offensive. If things aren't explained to people and there are expectations, then they will find it offensive. I know, for example, a number of people who have refused to attend family members' weddings because they know that there's intermixing, they know there's music, they know that there's going to be all sorts going on. Now, if they just didn't turn up, then clearly that family member is going to be offended by it. That why didn't you, what was the problem? But if that person goes and speaks to them in advance and says to them, look, I know you're getting married. However, how is the marriage going to be? Is it going to be free mixing? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be there, whatever? Yes, there is. Okay. You understand my view. You know what sort of person I am. I would find it extremely difficult to attend. I would find it extremely difficult. Would you want to put me in that awkward circumstance? The brother, the sister, whoever it is that's getting married would say, of course I don't want to. If there's true love, they're going to say, of course I don't want to put you in a difficult circumstance. Could I not just visit you after the wedding? So if we're not communicating to our neighbors, if we're not discussing these things to our neighbors, then yes, they will find it offensive. But if we've made it clear to our neighbors that this is what we're not getting involved in for this, that, and the other reasons because of faith, then I cannot see why people will take offense. And if they do take offense to your religion, then they're taking offense to you. As a person, they are offended by you. Okay? They are offended by your beliefs. They're offended by your practices. They're offended by what you do. Then who's being unfriendly now? Okay? because these are your beliefs. You believe in Prophet Muhammad, you believe in Allah, you believe in the Quran, you believe in the injunctions within those. Okay, if they cannot understand that, if there cannot be mutual respect, if they cannot understand that this is, sorry, I don't accept that, I don't accept that, you know, you believe in X, I don't accept that, then clearly they're not accepting you as a person. So I think, like I said, I've answered that before, that we need to kind of get out of this kind of minority kind of thinking, this inferiority sort of thinking, that we're going to see as, you know, bad people if we do X or bad people if we do Y. The communication should be there right from the beginning. Things should be discussed. Your neighbors should know about you. Before Christmas came, we've had 2 Eids. Okay. Did we go to our neighbors and give them Eid gifts? Did we go to our neighbors and give them food after Ramadan? Did we explain to them what Ramadan is? Did we explain to them what Eid is? Did we also then, as a result, explain to them that we don't engage in Christmas? Was all that explained? Probably not. Then something happens and we want to behave in a certain way, and then we feel that our religion is the problem. It's not. It's our lack of communication. You're muted, Sajid. You're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm just conscious of time. We've got 10 minutes left, and we've still got some questions that we want to go through. I want to move away from Christmas and move towards a question that's coming for New Year's. And from the theme of the way this is going, I'm assuming I already know the answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Why can't we celebrate New Year's? It's only a date that brings people together, regardless of faith.
When people celebrate New Year's, what do they do? Do they have a party? Do they get married? Do they dance? Do they kiss the nearest person if they were in the middle of London and the fireworks were going off? What do they do? Now you'll find all the behavior is of that nature which Islam shuns. Okay? If we are doing shukr to Allah, if a person or a group of people do shukr to Allah, they sit there doing dhikr and do shukr to Allah, Ya Allah, we thank you for such a good year. Even though ours is a lunar calendar, Islam is a lunar calendar, not a solar calendar. So it's not something which is a religious calendar according to us. But if it's just the passage of time and we say shukr to Allah and we say thanks to Allah and we express our shukr, then there's no harm in that. There's no harm in that. It's an end of a year and you're expressing your gratitude for a good year, and we pray for a better year in 2021. There's no harm in that. But if we're speaking about the celebration of New Year's Day in the way I understand the celebration of New Year's Day, then clearly you can see there are many issues with that. Okay, again, we look at free mixing. Obviously, I appreciate many of these questions are irrelevant because London's in tier 4 and you know, there's going to be no celebrations. It's finally, you know, the North gets its own back on London because we've been in tier 3 and all these other tiers for a lot longer than the Southerners have. So you're getting a bit of taste of our medicine. So you know, thinking in the future, next year, the year after, we know what type of activities take place around New Year's Eve. There's parties, New Year's Eve parties. There's gatherings, there's drinking, there's merriment, and all the rest of it. That's not how Islam expresses gratitude on this particular day. So you know, in this way. So I hope that I've been able to distinguish between expressing shukr to Allah on the passing of time, whether that be somebody's sort of birthday, whether that be an anniversary of marriage, things of that nature, where it's just the passage of time and you want to express your gratitude to Allah, you want to thank Allah, you want to make dua for the following year. There's no harm in it, bearing in mind that, you know, the lunar calendar is the one that we follow, not the solar calendar. Okay, however somebody wants to do that, there will be no harm in it. But to engage in those type of activities that I've just described, which are impermissible in Islam, obviously that's clear as day.
Just to extend onto that, is it okay to send a text message or a WhatsApp message wishing them
a WhatsApp message that says what, sorry?
A WhatsApp message, or you know, a message to say wishing you all the best for the following year.
Yeah, there's no harm in that. There's no, that comes under the one which is a general, wish you the best, and that's it. There will be no harm in that.
So can we say Happy New Year?
You can say, I hope you have a, there would be no harm in expressing it. What you want to avoid is making it into something which is a particular group of people's way of life. Okay, well, you want to avoid that. As I've tried to reiterate throughout today's discussion, is about the identity that we must have as Muslims, and that we are a message from Allah to the people. We cannot forget that. Now, someone might say, well, I didn't choose that. Well, that's who we are. Okay, that's who we are. We are the last ummah, and the responsibility that's put on us is to ensure that the world receives the message of Allah. That's our responsibility. It's not that we have a career and we're Muslim as a side thing, or we, earn lots of money and we're Muslim as a side thing. No, our religion is what we are. That is our identifier. Unfortunately, it's not been said like that, in that way to us. So religion has just become like a kind of thing that we do. It's not. For Muslims, we have to proclaim the truth. That's our job. Why? Because we believe that Christianity no longer speaks for Allah. Judaism no longer speaks for Allah. All the other faiths that came before no longer speak for Allah. Only the Muslims speak for Allah. So for us now to also cut corners and blend in and all the rest of it, then we are doing no different than the nations who came before us did. That's exactly what they did. They wanted to fit in. That's why you started to see verses which were seen as, problematic for a particular era, that they were removed. They were taken out, or they were reinterpreted. You're seeing that now, obviously, in present day age as well. So as long as one is refraining from activities in the New Year's or using terminology which would not be construed as something of a religious nature, then that person can wish, have a happy, whatever they wish, they can do so. There's no harm on that, on a general, non-religious kind of statement.
Right, Mufti Sahib, again, we've got a few more minutes left. Just before we close, there's one more last question. This is, again, a Christmas question in workplace. There is another Muslim at work who's participating in all the seasonal fun with the colleagues. When I say no, I can't, basically I'm saying no based on my faith. I feel like the reply is, well, such and such is participating. Why can't you?
So I'll answer that in two ways. One will go back to the question or the answer that our colleagues should know who we are well before Christmas or whatever time of the year. They should know what we do and what we don't do, so Christmas then doesn't become difficult. So similarly, when the question arises that, okay, why do you do that? You can only respond for yourself. You cannot respond for that other person. So if they say, look, Abdullah, he's a party animal, he's doing all of it, the mistletoe, the whole job lot. Why are you such a, prune? Why are you such an awkward so-and-so? Why are you so fundamental? Are you extreme, all the rest of it, right? That person says, I cannot answer for Abdullah. For Abdullah, you need to speak to Abdullah yourself, because we practice our own faith in the way we practice it. As for me, I practice my religion. Okay, and when I practice my religion, that will mean that obviously I adhere to it. And this is my way of adhering to it. I cannot speak for anybody else. So do not speak for that person. Do not say, oh, well, he's irreligious, or he doesn't take his religious seriously, or whatever. But obviously that's ghiba. And you don't want to go into ghiba. What you say is, with regards to Abdullah, you ask Abdullah yourself. Ask Abdullah that why, if you're saying that you pray but Abdullah doesn't pray, then go ask Abdullah why he prays. I can answer for myself. I pray because obviously a Muslim has to pray. It is their religious obligation to pray, and I do so. That's it. So only answer from your own perspective. And that will apply to, obviously, I don't partake in religious festivities that are not Islamic. I do not partake in secular activities in a manner which is where religion has already given a response to it. I don't partake in those kind of things. That's who I am. You want to know what Abdullah does? Then go speak to Abdullah.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan, Mufti Sahib. I think there's been a lot of questions there, both from the chat and from the the ones that have come in. We'll close up here. Is there any summary that you'd like to, a minute summary, a few sentences that you'd like to share based upon what you've said today?
I'll say this, okay? We chose to live as a minority. Whether that choice was made by our parents or whether that choice was made by us directly. The choice, when it was made by our parents, we've continued to support that position by continuing to live here. We can quite easily choose not to live here if we feel that we're dealing with so many pressures about our faith that we cannot handle. We do not need to. You can quite easily, whatever one's background is, and you know, we don't want to hear the sob stories. Yeah, but Islam's not, you know, like X there, Y there, whatever. We don't want to hear no sob stories. Being in a minority, you expect this. That's why being in a minority is problematic. Okay, well, you know, if you look at the Black community being a minority in the States, if you look at other, you know, being a minority has its problems. Okay, that's simple as it's a fact. If you end up being in a majority, then yes, it has its, you know, it solves a lot of problems. Doesn't necessarily mean that Islam is stronger there, but it means you can practice your faith without that same level of scrutiny that you would have to. You know, my family, for example, came from northern Pakistan. If I lived in northern Pakistan, I would not be under the same kind of pressure that I would be if I was continually, well, actually Bradford's a bit different, but you know what I mean, if I was living somewhere else. Bradford's a bit like northern Pakistan. So, you know, so that's the first thing, okay, is our choice. We chose to live here. That's the first point I want to make. The second point is that does not excuse us from our religious practice, okay? That means just because we're the minority does not excuse us. We still need to maintain our religious identity. And we're very fortunate as a minority in that the country we live in allows us to exercise that right. And that's, you know, we've got to be good, you know, we've got to express gratitude in a way to be thankful by showing to our community locally and nationally that we are an asset to this country. We're not a problem, we're an asset. So that's the point number two, okay? And the third point is your religion is your key identifier as a Muslim. Now you can choose it not to be. We all have a choice. We can choose and say, well, you know what? Islam is kind of important to me, but it's not that important to me. Education is, that's fine. We can prefer the dunya over the akhirah. We have that choice, even as Muslims. But then we should not be surprised if we have to be punished in the grave to be clean, or if we're punished by being sent to Jahannam before we're sent to Jannah. We should not be surprised at that either. For Jannah, it requires a lot of hard work. Nothing in life is free, okay? You can't get, you know, an ice cream for free in the dunya. You're talking here about Jannah, which has got the most amazing things in there, which is beyond a person's wild imagination, where the person does not age. She lives for eternity. They have what their hearts desire. There's no limit to the things they can experience. That's just some of the things. So for that, we have to make some difficult decisions. We need to make sure that our community, whether it's our work community, our school community, our local community, is well aware of us and our beliefs and our practices. We need to be an asset wherever we are. That will be hopefully my takeaway message for everybody, is be an asset to your community.
Once again, Mufti Saab, Jazakallah khairan for taking the time out to sharing your knowledge and your information through your years of experience. I'd like to close up with letting you know a bit, a summary of what WIFAQ does for those of you who have joined after I gave a brief intro. WIFAQ Ulama deals with public affairs. It's a governing body up and down the country full of ulamas. It's recognized nationally. It's recognized by Parliament. It provides guidance, counseling, and many other things. More information can be found on the Wifaqul Ulama website, which is www.wifaqululama.co.uk. It's on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any others that I may have missed. If in future you would like more information and you'd like WIFAQ to discuss a particular topic, please mail into WIFAQ, and this is the email address, engage@wifaqulama.co.uk. That's engage@wifaqulama.co.uk. Jazakallah for everyone to take their time out to listen to this. This talk will be available online in a couple of days on the Wafaq Ulama YouTube channel. Again, once again, Jazakallah khairan to Mufti Saab, and Jazakallah khairan for everyone who joined in on this talk today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.